Right. So the Ukraine government assesses that the Russian military is preparing for a large-scale attack on the anniversary of the invasion, which is February 22nd. So they think that the recent Russian conscription drive, which recruited more than 300,000 fresh recruits, may be thrown into a large-scale offensive to try to decisively change the war.
How large will it be? How much arsenal does Moscow have left to carry out such an attack?
We don't know exactly how large it'll be. Obviously, it's in the Ukrainians' interest to do the worst case scenario planning for a very, very large attack. I think Russia has a significant arsenal remaining. They are pulling weapons out of storage that they've kept for decades to try to bolster the attack. They're continuing to manufacture as much as they can, and they're buying weaponry and ammunition from North Korea, from Iran, from other places around the world to try to strengthen themselves for an offensive.
Well, tell us a bit more about how Ukraine is preparing for the offensive and also how you think the newly committed tanks by EU and NATO countries will help Ukraine repel this attack.
So Ukraine's doing everything they can to make sure that they have solid defensive lines, that they have fallback positions where necessary, preparing counterattacks, surprises, traps, everything they can do to defend themselves. The West is providing Ukraine with tremendous amounts of training, also good logistics, ammunition, and weaponry. The big question is, can the battle tanks that the West has now unlocked because of Germany relenting on allowing the Leopards into Ukraine, the Leopard 2 battle tanks into Ukraine, how quickly can they get them there? Estimates are they're going to be arriving in March, and hopefully that will be fast enough to help stop any Russian breakthroughs and to throw the Russians back. But time will tell. Time is pressing now.
Meanwhile, the US has accused Russia of violating a key nuclear treaty by not allowing timely inspections. What are these inspections and why would Russia be preventing them?
So this is the New START Treaty. This is the last strategic arms control treaty between the US and Russia, and it governs strategic nuclear weapons, the nuclear weapons that Russia and the United States would use against each other in a nuclear war. So the on-site inspections are necessary to verify the treaty, and they stopped these on-site inspections where one side would send inspections to go look at the nuclear missiles of the other side. They stopped them during COVID by mutual agreement for very good reasons. The problem is Russia has not allowed resumption of the inspections because Russia is tying this to the United States' support for Ukraine. Basically, Russia believes that the United States wants this treaty more than they do, and they're willing to risk losing the treaty in order to try to diminish US support for Ukraine. In the meantime, the State Department, because they have not been able to inspect Russia in coming up to 3 years, is no longer confident that Russia is within bounds of the treaty. And at the very least, Russia is violating the treaty by not allowing inspections and by canceling the major meeting that has to happen at least once a year between the two sides to discuss the treaty's implementation.
So what will happen then? What are the implications for the future of this New START treaty?
It looks bleak. It honestly looks like Russia has made a very cold calculation that the Ukraine war is more important to them than the arms control treaty. This arms control treaty is supposed to last us until February 2026, 3 years left. The two sides need to negotiate a new treaty if there's going to be anything to replace it, and they need to start now. But I think they're just not as interested in arms control, and they're willing to lose everything in order to win in Ukraine, which means that we could look at an arms race between the US and Russia. I think both sides are also keeping an eye on China, which is building up its nuclear arsenal very, very rapidly, and maybe moving to match the US and Russia. So we may be looking at a period for the first time since the late 60s, early 70s, where we don't have major negotiation between the US and Russia, where we have no arms control between the US and Russia.
Well, of course, over the Cold War period, the US and Russia were bound by several non-proliferation and arms treaties. So how do they compare to what's in place now?
Well, the START Treaty, which was negotiated and implemented in the 90s was very, very strong. New START is an excellent treaty. It provides a huge number of inspections and notifications of any changes to the strategic arsenal. And it has been very successful to date. It is one of the better treaties. But in the Cold War, we also had a treaty on intermediate range nuclear forces, that is, theater nuclear forces. There was conventional arms control, which bound Russia, called the CFE Treaty, which Russia has not complied with since 2007. So you could say the entire network of arms control treaties, not just bilaterally, but everything that's binding Russia, Russia is sort of wriggling out of, and we may see an era where arms control that restricts Russia, that restricts the United States, that restricts conventional forces, is coming to an end. It's a very dangerous moment.
William Alberque, thank you so much for talking to the world tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.